Hello and welcome to Medicines from Around the World. I'm Sid Katz, your host and moderator. Our guests today are Mr. Darwin Law from Mandarin Drugs here in Vancouver and Dr. Graham Johnson from the Department of Anthropology and Sociology at the University of British Columbia. Today we're going to talk about East meets West, the role of herbal medicine and food in the treatment and prevention of disease. Now, Vancouver, where we're doing this, is a very perfect example of a cosmopolitan center where many kinds of cultures have come together. Every culture mingling together, offering different types of food, spices, and even medicine. And when you walk into a pharmacy in the Chinatown area, it's a perfect example of what I mean. On one side, there'll be a Western pharmacy, complete with all of the modern medications for the treatment of disease. And on the other side, a whole different world, the world of herbal medicine. And along with the herbal medicine is a different understanding, because this is a different culture. And to understand the herbal medicine, you have to understand the culture from which it comes. But it's not just the medicines themselves that are important in the treatment of disease in Eastern philosophy. It's also the world of food and the world of other areas, other aspects which bring the balance to our lives. So today we're going to talk about this. We're going to get a primer, an introduction into the whole idea of herbal medicine and also the role of food and the important role that it plays in our lives. So first of all, we have Mr. Darwin Law. Darwin graduated from the University of British Columbia Faculty of Pharmaceutical Sciences in 1968, and he's been managing Mandarin Drugs ever since. Darwin is the third generation of herbal specialists in his family, first in China and now here in Vancouver. And he has very graciously agreed to come and give us a little introduction, a bit of a primer into the world of herbal medicine. So Darwin, why don't you start off and tell us a little bit about herbal medicine, what it is, and how it's supposed to work. Darwin Law.
Thank you very much, Dr. Katz, for your nice introduction. Of course, it's a very great pleasure to be here. Ladies and gentlemen, of course, young lady and young man, and also the baby. It is nice to be stuck earlier. Regarding the herbal medicine or any other kind of herbs which existing on earth, is a subject is a very, very old as a civilization itself. Even though it's very old, it is still widely used nowadays, and also gaining a lot of momentum in the Western society. For today, I'd like to discuss in the 4 areas as far as the herbal medicine is concerned. Number one, what is herbal medicine or herbal remedy or herbal patent medicine? They're all the same thing. They derive from herbs. And number 2, I'm going to tell you about what the herbal doctor do, their daily life. And the third thing I'd like to discuss with you about the herbal medicine related to us, our daily life. And then finally, I'd like to discuss about any new development or any new herb research come to be. Now, the herbal medicine itself, it is composed of the majority of herbs. I would say about 98%, they are all herbal remedy and herbal origin. It doesn't mean that the herbal medicine only about herbs, but they are also insect origin, the mineral origin, and also animal origin. Now, I'm talking only for the herbal origin, which is a botanical. The botanical means anything about plant kingdom. As you know, I'm going to show you one of this ginseng right here, which have been preserved in the past 20 years. But so happened I take it out. I couldn't find any other sample, so I take it out. This is a very, very old ginseng, but not ginger. A lot of people mistaken, you can grow this in your garden. It is not. This is a real ginseng. The ginseng itself are very popular in the Orient. Everybody know about it. Everybody using about it every day. Of course, and then the other thing is dong gui, which you can find it in Chinatown, any herb store. Now, the next one is about the animal origin. And I hope the audience, there are not any conservation about the danger species. We use a lot of deer horn and gallbladder from the bear. Now, I don't like too much about offending the people in the audience because we are not using very much about the deer horn because they are nearly extinct. And also, we are not using too much about the gallbladder from the bear. So, the deer horn and also the gallbladder have been widely used for many, many hundred years. Now, regarding the mineral origin, also the pearl, the copper sulfate, and also sulfur, they all can be considered, they mix up and used as a herb. And finally is the insect origin, which can be considered as wasp, you know, the bee, one type of bees they can use as a medicine, and also the lizard. Regarding the lizard, a lot of people have a lot of faith in it because they give you vitality, rejuvenating your body system. Okay, so the first area I just covered, and I'd like to get to another area, which about the doctor. Without the herbal doctor, we cannot make use of the herbal medicine. Just like without doctor, we cannot use any other drugs. So we need the doctor. The doctor himself have to be trained, usually 2.5 years in a medical school. Usually they have about 4 procedures when they see you. If you have a problem about any ailment, you go see a doctor. The first thing they want to do is sit down and relax, and they want to observe you and question you and listen what you complain about, and finally they diagnose. Now, regarding the diagnose, I like to stress one point. In those days, we don't have the stethoscope like the modern doctor, Western doctor has. So what they're using it, the 2 fingers as a stethoscope to press upon your pulse. And from this pressing upon it for 1.5 minutes, they will tell you what's wrong with you. And from the diagnose, and then prescribe the drug. And once you got the drug, which the herbs, what I meant is herbs, and from these herbs, you can prescribe it and prepare it and boil it and perk it and sim it until it becomes a bowl which you can drink. Because the Western drug, they're a little bit different from the herbal medicine. It's different from the Western drug in many ways. Let me give you an example. Usually, what we are using the Western drug is a target drug, which when you have a sore throat, so you take the antibiotic. But the Western drug is a little bit different because they want to build up your body strength to resist all these harmful bacteria, all these ailments. Then the final step is usually one of the course for see a herbal doctor. It takes maybe 1 month, 2 months. It is slow, but very sure. Sometimes get cured. But the Western medicine maybe take 1 week, 1.5 weeks, they get recovered. So that's a big difference. Now, and the third area, and I like to cover is this, that what is this medicine related to us, daily life? As we understand in our society, we are very health, diet conscious. You know, everybody like to slim, everybody like to healthy, you know. So, especially people at the golden age, they like to take the medicine, they like to take the herbal medicine, and sometimes when the Western medicine doesn't work, and they come to the Eastern medicine. So in my experience in Chinatown for over 20 years, and some people and some patients, they have no cure or no help from the Western doctor, and they come to see the herbalist. Usually they get help, or vice versa. Sometimes they see the herbal medicine first. If the herbal medicine doesn't work, and they come to Western medicine. But in these two worlds, there must be something it worked out. Now, and then the final part of it is the development and research. I understand that since in China, after the Cultural Revolution, and before that, it's a very bad situation, and nobody is have that kind of idea how to do it. But now, after the Cultural Revolution, they have some kind of incentive to make sure the people have a lot of research. For the time being, in the past 10 years, and there's a few other remedies which are coming out. For instance, this is a formula 581, which is a liquid, and they're also going to have capsule. And this one is for the tonic, for general health. And the people running down, or fatigue, or even can control some of the uncontrollable disease, which they are working very hard on this in the past 10 years. And of course, in this society, we are very much conscious about diet. So we have something about diet too. And all this is all from herbs, and is available anywhere in North America. And finally, I understand this subject is a very long one. And finally, I'd like to conclude this and have a little more time for discussion. I'd like to stress a few points for today's presentation. First of all, as a pharmacist myself, and also involved in medicine for so long, and I can boldly say for sure that herbal medicine, once it is used or prescribed by the herbal doctor, provided no harm at all, because all the herbs are natural. So in other words, suppose you go to see a herbalist doctor, and then they prescribe something for you. So you have a confidence in using it. So this is my very first point. I understand in our audience, when you go to see something about herbal medicine, if you're not sure about it, you won't take it. But as I stress again, there's no harm in all the natural remedy. Okay, and the number 2 point is for your interest and for your further education. For 10-15 minutes here, it doesn't provide you a lot of a background about herbal medicine, but I would suggest strongly that someday, somehow, you'd like to go to the herbal store or any store in Chinatown, which they will provide you a lot of information. Surprisingly, you will find something is more than I present to you right now. So in other words, when you're interested in it, go to the herbal store. They will help you to answer all your questions over there. And then finally, as regards the theme of this project, bringing research to life, which is a very, very good idea for the time now, especially in such an environment, we are free to learn and free to use. So that if we can have more government fund or any other organization which can provide more fund to make this research and make our society a much healthier and much better and much happier to live in the near future. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you very much, Darwin. I'd like to start the questioning. I'm sure there are a lot of questions in the audience, but one thing that occurred to me was, could you give us a little bit more detail, a bit more on, say, ginseng and how it's used? What type of remedies is it supposed to have, and when would it be prescribed?
As I just showed you, this is how it looks like from the ground when you earth from the ground. So this is contain all the mineral in it, just like what you take every day in vitamin. However, there are more than vitamin in it. They have some kind of steroid, which still we are under research. But you do the job for rejuvenating you. I'm not sure whether you heard the term of aphrodisiac. That's the meaning, aphrodisiac, you know. But every family household is using it. Just a general tonic.
Okay, we have a question here.
I'm a nurse, and I deal a lot with patients who have side effects and allergic reactions and things like this, and I wanted to know how the herbal medicine handles this, or if you do get these reactions.
The side effects?
Side effects and allergic reactions to herbal medicine.
As far as this area is concerned, regarding the allergy, which, as I mentioned previously, allergic is a very targeted drug. As I mentioned, Western medicine is not for that purposes. They are Eastern medicine, herbal medicine, is only to strengthen your body up. Suppose you have allergy, there might be something wrong with you. So in other words, you're using the herbal medicine to strengthen you up, to helping you for the allergy. There are nothing directly to the allergy. Unlike the Western medicine, when you have a hay fever, you take Seldane, but not in this area, in herbal medicine.
I don't know if you understood my question, in that, what if the person has an allergic reaction to the herb that you give them? Like, say someone is allergic to ginseng.
As far as in my experience concerned, I never seldom heard about it. But if you have allergic to it, just don't take it, that's all.
Do you
just like you're allergic
the second
to shrimp
time.
and everything.
Right.
You stop taking it, and that's it.
But is it, Darwin?
But the allergic itself, the percentage is very, very low, absolutely low.
You mentioned when you were talking that because it's natural, it might not have as many side effects. Is that what you mean by that?
Yes, yes.
Thank you very much.
Now, Darwin, there are some physicians in this room who perhaps might take a bit of issue with you when you said that you can go from one type of medicine to the other type of medicine. And I guess this might be a concern, and that is, I'd like to hear your opinion about this.
Yes, I have been asking quite a number of times in my 10 or 15 years practice in pharmacy. However, herbal medicine, as I mentioned again, is a herbal thing, it's a natural thing. Just like you take barley, you take rice, you take meat, you take everything, they're natural things, you know. They're not a specific drug. So I wouldn't say that there's no reaction whatsoever. If you're taking the Western medicine, or you can take the Eastern medicine at the same time. And there's no reaction whatsoever, to my understanding.
Now, the idea of treatment of disease would be to try to take the best possible substance to help you at that time. Does that mean that you would try Western medicine first, target it, and then go to herbal remedies? Or is there a way to decide how to do that?
Either one way.
One way or the other?
You can do one way or the other.
Okay. Are there other questions in the audience? Yes. Could you please stand up? Come on.
I'm a bit...
Go ahead. Just ask the question.
Oh, sorry. I'm a bit skeptical about these herbal medicines. I grew up with my mother feeding me these vile concoctions. Like, once a month I had to drink the ginseng. Another month I'd have to drink all these other things and eat all these special foods because it was good for me. It would remove my pimples. And I've been living away from my mother for the last 3 years, and I haven't been making these vile concoctions. So I'm healthy right now, so I'm having a hard time. I guess I don't understand how these medicines work, and I've been trying to read up on this yin and yang and balancing, and you know, she spent an incredible amount of dollars on all the things that she bought, and she'd say, well, drink it, it's expensive. You know, this costs $69 a pound. So how do I know this medicine is still working in me? Or do you understand my question?
Yes, I understand fully what you said. You know. It's a quite a big question about it. Well, I didn't touch very in depth about the herbal medicine. There are a lot to do with psychological effect and also traditional effect, which I don't mention the detail within a short period of time. Sometimes when you take medicine, and it doesn't mean that it's the medicine for the purpose. As I mentioned again and again, herbal medicine remedy mostly to build you up, strengthen you, you're weak. They strengthen up you so you resist any other ailment or any other disease. That's the basic theory behind, mostly.
So is it, Darwin, a little bit like taking vitamins and minerals to perhaps supplement food? Is that what you're getting at?
Yeah, more or less to the sense. Yes, more or less to the sense.
Okay, and I think Dr. Johnson will say a bit more about that.
About that. Now you're not taking it, you feel all right, but when you're taking it, you find a problem. So it is a kind of vitamin. You take it, you feel better. You don't feel it, you still feel better. Because your food contains all the vitamin. That's what I mentioned is psychological part of it. Sometimes it plays a very important role in all the medicine too.
Okay, we have another question here.
Maybe I make a comment on the clinical diagnosis of the Eastern medicine. And I suppose you should mention the doctor's door on the clinical examination in addition to the palpation of the radial pulse. Certainly in other clinical examination, the Western medicine would have additional play to make the diagnosis. One question is that many of those herbal medicine claim to have a wide effect on many different kind of illnesses, from diabetes, high blood pressure, to cancer. For example, ginseng or even Ningqi. You did mention about the one of the contents being a corticosteroids. At the same time, you also mentioned that taking multiple doses of these medications would have no side effects. And I'd like you to comment on the value of the corticosteroids in this medicine, or plus other quote-unquote impurities.
Okay, then we're getting a little bit deeper and deeper now. But anyway, let me put it this way. The herbal medicine and all this steroid and other things, they're still under research. So far we know there's some mysterious steroid existing in ginseng, which I participated in a symposium a few years ago. There's a lot of Russian, German, French, English, they all discuss about it, but finally they didn't have any result or anything about it. They're still under research. Now when you're talking about the diagnosis about the doctor can make use of the herbal medicine for curing diabetes. Now, this is another, I come back to the same principle again. Because we all human beings, when we getting to a certain degree, certain part of it, the lack of certain part of it. So in other words, all the herbal medicine, they improving, such like you mentioned about diabetes, some other ailment, they're improving. Suppose you're taking 1 or 2 pills, now you're taking less. You're better healthier than before. That's the herbal medicine all behind. They're not directly cure everything. Some they do, but not most of them.
Thank you. Right, we have a question here in the front. Sir, could you stand up and come over here? Thank you.
I have 2 questions which are related. First of all, diagnosis is obviously the basis of all good treatment, and it seems very much that in many cases Western diagnosis seems to be very erratic. The doctors will give you something and it doesn't work, so they say pay another $100 and you we'll give you something else, and then a little while later that doesn't work, so they try again. Now in Chinese diagnosis you also mentioned the pulse, and I would like to know how many pulses a Chinese doctor can detect. And we had an example over here with the young lady whose mother was obviously an amateur diagnostician and just kept on trying and trying and trying. So would you comment on the diagnosis, please? Thank you.
Yeah, we are getting more further depth now. Diagnosis is one of the basic art. One of the herbal doctors have to master it. It takes them at least 2.5 years, and also take them a lifetime to practice it. The lifetime, if they're good, they diagnose it very accurately. From the both sides, on the right hand side, they represent certain part of the body. Suppose the liver, the spleen, and the lung, and the heart, for example. On the other side, they represent to diagnose upon the pulse about certain part of the body, maybe the brain. I'm not quite sure. I'm not a herbal doctor. So in other words, only the herbal doctor knows about it. But through the diagnosis by pulse, it's about quite a high percentage of accuracy. Because you have to understand those olden days. There's no stereoscope. Ladies and men cannot see each other 1,000 years ago. So what else they have to diagnose by what? So the lady from the curtain put out the hand, and the doctor diagnosed from there. That's how they started from the early beginning, about 1,000 years ago, and until now. And that art still exists. And that art has been quite accurate, because my uncle was working with me for the past 16 years. All he does, sit down, give me your hand, I'll do it for you. And they find out what's wrong with him.
Another question.
I wonder if you could bring us up to depth on the type of research that is being done on herbal remedies. I read a book several years ago written by a Harvard physician who actually went to China intending to debunk much of what he had read about herbal medicines, and ended up coming back a great believer because he conducted rigorous scientific studies and found that people he was treating in a Western manner were not having any better results than people who were being treated in traditional Chinese manners. And I'm wondering if you could bring us up to depth on scientific research that is being done on your type of remedy.
Yes, I'm very glad to do that, because I don't have to mention too many in my presentation. We have a Chinese character, and Chinese language is impose a very big barrier. If you know the language, it's much easier for you to conduct all the research and development. However, in the recent 10-15 years, as I mentioned previously, a lot of research are done in China, because they're huge, represent a huge population on Earth. And they have a lot of incentive to make the young people and researchers, they have reward. So all these people, scientists, they research. And there are a few products coming out, just like this one, which have been discovered approximately 15 years ago, and it marketed just only a few years ago. It is a tonic, it's a rejuvenating for your fatigue. It is something to helping people if they have an uncontrollable disease or some other kind of ailment. It's absolutely no harm done for any people. So as far as the development is concerned, they are underway. They are underway now. It is a matter of get more attention. Just like right now what we're doing. We have created big attention. Now here, maybe someday somehow we'll go to China and do something like that. Have some kind of seminar to stimulate people's ideas, stimulate people's so that they can do more research. They are on the way right now.
Thank you. I think we're going to move along. I'm sure we'll come back to these points when we have more questions later on. But as I mentioned before, it's not just the herbal remedies that are a part of Chinese culture in the treatment and prevention of disease, but also the whole role of food. And Dr. Graham Johnson, who has a master's and a PhD from Cornell University, he's been studying a lot of aspects of Chinese culture through the years, and he wants to tell us a little bit about the role that food plays in Chinese culture and tradition in the prevention and treatment of disease. Dr. Graham Johnson now is in the Department of Anthropology and Sociology at the University of British Columbia. So Dr. Johnson, we all like Chinese food, but what role does it play in the treatment and prevention of disease?
Good afternoon. I'm not a pharmacist, and I know very little about all the details of drugs and herbal remedies and so on and so forth. I'm not even particularly skilled in talking about healthcare. But I've been looking at Chinese populations in various parts of the world, in China itself, in Hong Kong, and amongst various communities here in Canada and other parts of North America for a fair degree of time. And one of the things that is very clear very quickly when you sort of move into looking at how Chinese people live is the centrality of food. That the normal greeting amongst Chinese people is, have you eaten yet? 吃饭没有了? 食咗飯未? And this is very important to draw attention to food and food habits. And let me say another little thing about Chinese culture. It's been around for a long time. Chinese culture is in fact the world's longest lived culture. When we're looking at Chinese culture, we're looking at a continuity of development which goes back to really the time of the ancient Egyptians, or the peoples that inhabited between the Tigris and the Euphrates. The people who live in current-day Iraq, the people who live in current-day Egypt are not the descendants of the people who lived in China way back 3,000–4,000 years ago. The other thing about Chinese culture is that there are 1.2 billion Chinese in the world, so they must be doing something right. But we also have to recognize, too, that China has always lived on something of a margin. I mean, China today is 22% of the world's population. It's got 11% of the world's arable area. So you can see why food might be extremely important. And we all like to eat Chinese food. I mean, Chinese food in Vancouver is some of the best Chinese food in the world, and I say that without prejudice. But food's not something that's neutral from a Chinese perspective. Of course, you need food in order to survive. You need to eat in order to maintain bodily health. But I think we can say that in Chinese culture and amongst Chinese population, there's something of an obsession with food. I mean, if you're ever stuck for conversation with Chinese people, just start talking about food, and you'll get on like a house on fire. Things will go absolutely swimmingly. There's an incredible knowledge about food amongst Chinese people. They will talk lovingly about it. They will talk in great detail about it. The tradition of what Chinese people talk about is really at least 3,000 years old, if not more. In China has had a writing system for much longer than most cultures. We can look back at the Chinese ritual books, which are 3,000 years old, and we find conversations in them about food. And a lot of those conversations and a lot of those prescriptions are about what food does for people's bodily health. So we can enjoy food in a Chinese context, but I think we also have to think about what it does to people. What it does to people in terms of maintaining their health. And so I would like to suggest to you that when we're talking about food, when we're talking about ideas and belief about food, we have to see that it, in a very real sense, is a kind of medicine. The kinds of things that Mr. Law was talking about that happens on one side of his pharmacy is specifically to deal with problems of ill health. But what I'm suggesting is that on a regular basis, Chinese people eat not just because it's enjoyable, but they eat to keep fit and well. Because there's a sense that there is a balance. I mean, we heard about one person's experience with her mother giving her foul concoctions, but that is perhaps only an example of how much care people take about their children and their family members for whom they're responsible. I think that if we look, we have to see that the body has to maintain some kind of equilibrium. I mean, we've mentioned already yin and yang. It's a very ancient sort of philosophical belief which Chinese people have. when it comes to food, it sort of gets transformed into a way to categorize food. I mean, you look at food and you don't just see food as, oh, that's good to eat. You see food as having some very important effect. And the way you determine what kind of effect that might be is to firstly perhaps determine what kind of a person you are, what kind of a state of health you're in. But sort of perhaps a major distinction we often have when we're talking about Chinese food is the distinction between foods that are heating, riqi in Mandarin, yihei in Cantonese, or foods that are cooling, liangqi, lenghei. That is, you eat something and it has a consequence for you. So certain kinds of food, foods which are fried, for example, or foods which are made with fatty substances like peanuts, tend to be, or foods that are made with a peppery flavor, tend to be heating. Foods which, like most water vegetables or most crustaceans, like crabs, tend to be cooling. There are some kinds of beans, for example, mung beans are one thing, the things that sort of bean sprouts are made of, tends to be cooling as well. And so sometimes if there's something wrong with your body, if you've got a little cold sore, for example, if you continue to eat crabs or something that was identified to be cooling, that would not make those cold sores any better. In fact, the problem might well be that the cold sores themselves are a consequence of eating too many cooling things. And what you're trying to do is you're trying to look at the food that you have and balance your intake to take care of the problems that you might be able to identify. That at certain times of the year, for example, particularly for people who come from South China, they tend to like to eat certain kinds of foods which will be heating, which will help you deal with the fact that the seasons are changing. A very important heating food is snake, for example. Another extraordinarily important heating food, which is illegal here, is dog. But the point is, if you go to South China at this time of year, until probably about March, there'll be a lot of attention paid to things like snake soups. And if you go to China itself, there'll be a lot of little places which are selling dog meat made in sort of wonderful little sort of pots with lots of very pungent spices and so on and so forth. But the point is, it's kind of like a tonic. It's preparing you for all these sort of terrible things that come from all this terrible cold that is descending on South China, you know, where the temperature goes down to 20 degrees. So you've got to somehow sort of build yourself up and protect yourself against all these inclement airs that are sort of swinging around. And even very seemingly quite neutral things like tea can also have a very important effect upon one's health. And we talked about special teas which are being developed here, but tea is not something that is a neutral element. That old guys like me go into the tea house to Yamta, and I have to order a particular kind of tea. I have to order bole because that builds me up, because I'm an old guy, you know, and I have to sort of worry about my health. But perhaps of all the things which are sort of most redolent of healthfulness when it comes to Chinese food are soups. Now again, we tend to sort of see soup as something that you look at the beginning of a meal, and sometimes it tastes good and sometimes it doesn't taste good. But for Cantonese people in particular, soups are terribly, terribly important. Now the thing is, where do you buy soup ingredients? Do you buy soup ingredients at the supermarket? Well, you might buy some of them. You might buy your pork bones or something to make your stock. But the most important ingredients for the soup are actually bought at a medicine shop. Now, one of the things that has happened in the last 20 20 years with the growth of the population. The Chinese population of Vancouver is a large number of medicine shops have grown up, shops that sell ginseng and herbs, but they also sell things like dates, red dates from North China, a whole array of things that you put into soups, and you eat the soup, you drink the soup in very much the same way that you drink herbal medicines, for very much the same reason, as a sort of a tonic, as a way to sort of build you up and to maintain your bodily health. So what we're sort of saying is, well, what I'm saying in general, is that Chinese food is very close to medicine. Chinese food is actually very close to the idea of folk knowledge of what it is needed to keep people not merely alive, but also well. So what I have, just to sort of, since we're talking about food, and I love to talk about food, I've just got a few slides which I want to show you, which might illustrate some of the things that I'm talking about. I think you can see them on the monitors here, and the first slide that we have is just a lunch that I had in the winter, and you can see there's some chicken and there's some vegetables and some very delicious things. And we can go through. Here's another picture of a nice lunch, some fish, some chicken which is boiled, some fried vegetables, an array of very good-looking things. Here is a slide of a very nice, happy festival occasion to celebrate the raising of a lantern in an ancestral hall, a fair ceremony which was actually held yesterday in Hong Kong. This is food of a very distinctive South China group. It's Hakka food, and there are all kinds of wonderful things. But note what is happening here is the gentleman at the back who is sort of smiling away there. He's putting into his bowl rice. And the core, if you like, of a Chinese dinner has to be some kind of staple. In the south it's rice, in the north it's wheat of certain, or millet. And these things that you're seeing on the table are what you put on the rice to flavor it. But no Chinese food in Chinese dinner is worth its salt unless it has some kind of basic staple, some rice or some wheaten products on which you put all these very distinctive things in it. Now this kind of food that we have on the table here is a very different one. This is a food which is known in Cantonese as da bin lao, where you have in the middle of the table a boiling pot of soup, and then a whole array of raw things which you dip into the soup and then you eat. Very, very distinctive, very good, very popular in the winter time because it's a heating kind of food. Now what goes into a Chinese meal? Well, there is protein, of course, always sold fresh. Here's a chicken for sale in the market. Here is a little stall in Macau, which I visited last winter in December, where you can see wonderful fish hanging, wonderful vegetables. The essence of freshness is apparent here. Rice, that slide is backwards for those who can read Chinese. Rice, as I say, is very, very important. But also rice, again, is not some kind of neutral quantity. It's also, rice is not simply rice. There are different kinds of rice, different qualities of rice, which people would buy according to the different grades which they see stuck in those tubs there. The Chinese methods of food preservation are absolutely remarkable. Here is a salted fish which is being preserved, and here we can see salted fish hanging, waiting to be bought, and in the great pots there is a salted fish which is preserved in peanut oil. There's a very interesting relationship, incidentally, between eating salted fish and certain kinds of health problems, not least perhaps is stomach cancer. Here's another kind of preservation. This is the preservation of shrimp. This is shrimp paste, which is wonderful when eaten with squid, where you put salt on shrimp and the salt and the shrimp to sort of consume themselves. And here's another, the basis for many, many soups. These are sun-dried squids. Very, very important. Another kind of preservation, which is also a winter dish. This is in a village in South China, and it's Chinese sausages, and Chinese preserved meat, which is sort of drying and preserving in the sun. And here's a shop in Macau, which I visited about a month ago, which again has a whole array of Chinese sausages and hams and other preserved meats hanging up. You can find all these in Chinatown. No problem at all. Another kind of store which in back of this woman is full of wonderful sauces, soy sauce and so on and so forth, which is absolutely fundamental to Chinese cuisine. Another way of presenting food is by steaming it, and here is rice dumplings, I suppose we can call them. They're eaten particularly at the time of the winter solstice, 21st of December, and this particular kind is stuffed with white radish. It's absolutely delicious. A summer dish, preserved bean curd, not preserved bean curd, in a very sort of jelly, bean curd jelly it's called, dao fu fa. And tea. Here's a tea shop. We've talked about the fact that tea is not some neutral commodity. It's something that one takes, again, to restore the balance of the body. And last but not least, let me say that food can also be used to fulfill ritual obligations. Here is a very important ceremony on the occasion of the Festival of the Hungry Ghosts, where women are chanting sutras to the dead at the back, but in the foreground there are all kinds of offerings to the dead. They happen to be absolutely vegetarian. Here is the celebration of the birthday of the goddess of the sea, Tin Hao. The presentation of food offerings to deities and gods and ancestors is very, very important. Right in the middle of there, there's a great big turkey, but also a lot of fruit. And last but not least, in worshipping gods in a temple in Macau, we again see all kinds of food offerings. So we can see food is important for health. It's probably also important for some spiritual and other needs which we can identify. So I'm not talking about herbal remedies or anything like that, but I am talking about food. And I'm saying that that has an absolutely fundamental relationship to the preservation of health for Chinese people.
Well, you've certainly accomplished in making me hungry, probably everybody else in the audience. Let me lead off the questions, Dr. Johnson, by asking, go back to your last statement. How close, though, is what you're talking about in terms of food and its use in medicine to what Darwin was talking about in terms of the herbs? Obviously, the food seems to taste better, but how is the comparison?
Well, I think it's very close, that what we cannot do is really distinguish between food simply as something that you enjoy and food as something you take for maintaining bodily health. I think that's one side of the business that Darwin is talking about, the herbal medicine business, is exclusive to a number of other stores in and about Chinatown, on Pender Street in particular, which specializes exclusively in what we might call Chinese medicine. But what I'm saying is that there is some aspect of Chinese medicine which you take when you have a problem, like diabetes, say, but there's other kinds of Chinese herbs which you take as a matter of course, just to make sure that your health doesn't in some way collapse.
Question?
Yeah, I just wanted to know if you knew what kind of percentage in China are vegetarians, or what the balance is for meat eaters and vegetarians.
Well, there are certain very important categories of the Chinese population which are vegetarian, the most important being, of course, Buddhist monks and nuns. It's not an enormous proportion of the population, but I'm always struck by the fact that abbots at Buddhist monasteries always seem to live to be about 125. It's probably because they still live on bean curd and vegetables. I don't know. But I think a lot of the Chinese population traditionally was vegetarian most of the time, for the simple fact that all they had to eat most of the time was their basic staple rice with perhaps some vegetables and some preserved vegetables on the top, where things like meat was something that was eaten really only at festival occasions. So I don't think it's a very large proportion of the Chinese population by choice, but perhaps by practice it is a very large proportion.
You mentioned hot foods and cold foods and the importance in maintaining the balance. I wondered, in terms of food preparation, we find fried, steamed,
Right.
boiled. Is there any significance culturally, or is this just a matter of taste differences?
Well, I mean, there are ways of doing it, but one of the things I was trying to indicate, and I probably didn't indicate it sufficiently with the slides at the beginning, when you look at a Chinese dinner table, it would in fact have a balance of dishes. You would not wish to have dishes which sort of exclusively are fried, or you try and maintain a balance between the different forms of preparation. I mean, there's basically two kinds. You can fry or you can use water. You can boil or you can steam. There are no ovens traditionally in Chinese cooking. I mean, you have a kind of a barbecue oven. But when you look at a Chinese dinner, it maintains that balance of different kinds of foods and different techniques of preparation. You wouldn't want to eat the hot pot, the dabinlo, every day, because that would just knock you out. I mean, it would give you too much heating qualities. And in fact, what you do when you eat dabinlo, you should drink beer, because beer is actually cooling. So that sort of counteracts the heating quality of eating all that that boiled food.
Now you're making me thirsty. What about comfort food? When I was brought up, unlike our guest in the second row, my comfort food was chicken soup. At any time I would come down with anything, I'd be fed chicken soup. Is there a similarity here?
Chicken soup seems to be a cultural universal. No, I mean, it's very important in Chinese culture too, but perhaps the most dramatic ones in terms of restorative qualities of food is what women eat after childbirth. That after childbirth, a woman is extraordinarily vulnerable. I mean, she has been open to the elements, and she's produced this object, and she has to be sort of she has to be restored, and she is restored by a wonderful combination of ginger, vinegar, boiled eggs, and pig's trotters. And it sort of comes out like a great sort of marmalade. I don't like it. My wife adores it. So, but women have to take this, and it sort of builds them up. It's a great tonic once again.
I'm sure you don't mean really that children are objects.
No, I'm just as a matter of all I'm saying is that after birth this thing has appeared, and
I think you better ask your question.
I think I better.
we don't talk about children being children until they're 1 month old. After 1 month, you can talk about children being real things. But until that 4 months, that 1 month ceremony, children are a little bit sort of ambiguous.
Working in Vancouver hospitals, we do run into quite a bit of cultural discrepancies with medicine, and we run into problems with people after childbirth. Is there any way that the herbal medicine people or anyone from the different cultures can be involved through the hospital with the ANSO people to work together? Like the medical team is made up of many different, there's physiotherapy, respiratory, nurses, doctors, everybody. Cannot the herbalist be involved as well? Have you made any attempt to work with the medical teams?
This question has never come to my mind, as you just mentioned. We have in the Chinatown several groups. There's one called Chinese Society, and they are willing to help, and there's a lot of volunteers involved with the project. They are for the benefit of the especially Chinese group or any other kind of ethnic group. So if later on, if you want to contact them, they might helping you on the aspect you just mentioned. You know? There's such a group, people are helping you.
That's a very interesting point. Matter of fact, something that we can perhaps elaborate on in another program. Other questions? Yes.
Before I rush off to Chinatown and buy my ginseng, I'm just wondering, do the Chinese live longer and healthier lives?
Whoa.
Well,
Compared to whom?
Put it this way, at least more healthier, I would say. So maybe because the ecological aspect, or because maybe the traditional aspect, we Oriental look a little bit of younger when compared with the same age with the Caucasian people and the Oriental. And the Orientals always look a little bit younger. This is all the recognized fact, you know. It is maybe because of the herb, because the way we eat, as Dr. Johnston mentioned, or maybe the way we live. So there's a lot of things we can learn from each other, you know. At least this aspect about ginseng, about this, you have to learn from the Oriental.
I guess that more Chinese people die with smiles on their faces. Is that what you're saying?
Well,
and looking younger.
The important thing, of course, is that after death, the living continue to feed the dead. One of the most interesting things that happens in funeral ceremonies, for example, it's a very touching thing, is that people, the dead, are fed their favorite foods. And in memorializing them on death days and festivals and the like, food is made as an offering, and very often there's a very personal link between the deceased person and the kind of food offerings that are being made.
That's really interesting. Well, unfortunately, as I said, this was only an introduction. I don't think we've even paid justice to how significant this coming together might be. There's a lot more we have to understand about herbal medicine, how it relates to our scientific principles in the Western world, and also food, and how food relates to our daily lives, and how important it is to how we live. So Mr. Darwin Law of Mandarin Drugs, Dr. Graham Johnson from the University of British Columbia, I want to thank you very much for coming together like this and participating, and thank you very much for joining us. Thank you. So the next time your mother tries to put something down your throat, do you think that you'll have a little better understanding about what it is?
I have a wonderful understanding, and I can't wait to teach my cooking class tomorrow at Granville Island.
Did you learn something today that you didn't know before?
Most certainly, most certainly. So I'm associated with Orientals and Occidentals children, so you can see that I have been exposed to it before, and will continue to be.
And are you as hungry as I am at the moment?
Yes, yes, very much so.
How do you think that this guy gets to do research into food?
A little tasting here and there.
Thank you very much, and thank you for being so patient. I hope that we all learned something today. Thank you. See you next week.